A very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Symposium on Multi-Stakeholders Engagement in Forest Protected Area Governance for Conservation and Livelihoods. This symposium is organized by the Malaysian Nature Society, hosted by University of Nottingham, Malaysia, and supported by University Putra, Malaysia. Plus, it is in conjunction with the Malaysian Nature Society's 80th anniversary, University Nottingham, Malaysia's 20th anniversary, and University Putra, Malaysia's 50th anniversary. What a celebration indeed. Also, we are grateful to have the support of the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources with the presence of Yang Berbahagia Datuk Zurina Pawante, Secretary General at the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. Dato, thank you very much for taking the time to grace the symposium amidst your busy schedule. MNS, the country's oldest environmental NGO, has always worked hand in hand with policymakers to help improve forest governance. With that, the objective of the symposium is to raise awareness about how the general public, as stakeholders, can collectively protect our natural heritage. And so I'm really glad that we can still all come together, albeit digitally. The pandemic cannot stop us on our quest to conserve the forest resources. Join me, Vanessa SYT, your host, as together we partake in a week-long discussion with speakers from 11 countries, covering various topics such as policies, pluralistic forest governance, roles in protected areas management, community engagement and livelihoods, and much, much more. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to officially mark the start of the symposium, I would like to welcome our guest of honor, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Zurina Pawante, to give the opening speech. Please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Salam sejahtera and a very good morning to all. Yang berbahagia Professor Dr. Ahmad Ismail, President of the Malaysian Nature Society. Yang berbahagia Professor Andy Chan Tak Yi, Vice Provost, University of Nottingham, Malaysia. Yang berbahagia Professor Dr. Muhammad Roslan Sulaiman, Vice Chancellor, University Putra, Malaysia, distinguished professors, academicians, experts, community action leaders, and conservationists on the ground. First and foremost, Alhamdulillah, I feel blessed that the COVID-19 pandemic has not dampened our spirits to be present here today. And despite the limitations a virtual symposium can offer, the organizer has indeed, which is the Malaysian Nature Society, MNS, continues to show commitment in realizing this event. Malaysia is a mega diverse country, blessed with enormous variety of flora and fauna. Many of these are endemic or are found only in our lands and waters. Hence, the richness of our biodiversity must be effectively conserved, sustainably managed, and responsibly utilized for future generations. Malaysia's rainforests are among the most diverse on the planet. Pristine forests of all kinds occur across Malaysia with complex structures from the mangrove forest to the highland forests. We can be proud that even in small areas of Malaysia, forests are richer in tree and wildlife species than most similar-sized areas in tropical Africa or America. Ladies and gentlemen, at the Rio Earth Summit in 2022, Malaysia has made a pledge to maintain at least 50% of Malaysia's landmass under forest and tree cover. Today, almost 3 decades later, Malaysia has not abandoned on that pledge. Malaysia's forest cover is currently at 55.3% or 18.28 million hectares of its total land area, exceeding Malaysia's initial commitment of 50%. Of this forested area, approximately 10.92 million hectares had been designated as permanent reserve forest or permanent forest estate, 3.31 million hectares as totally protected area, and 4.04 million hectares as state land forests. This represents the nation's will and commitment to conserve and sustainably manage its forests. Ladies and gentlemen, Malaysia's journey in achieving sustainable development has always been the national government's priority. The eradication of poverty is as important as sustaining economic growth. Alongside this, Malaysia has been taking comprehensive measures to ensure that the country's economic development does not come at undue sacrifice of its natural resources. Malaysia puts in place mechanisms that ensures and improves the sustainability of the forest and forest-based industry. Sustainable forest management, SFM, is pursued through the implementation of various national strategies and programs such as the Forest Certification Initiative, Annual coup, and the implementation of best practices in selective logging. Since the year 2001, the Malaysian Timber Certification Scheme, or MTCS, as a voluntary national timber certification scheme, was implemented. The MTCS has since become a leading timber certification scheme for tropical forests in Southeast Asia and was accorded international recognition. As of 31st July 2021, a total of 5.7 million hectares has been certified sustainably managed under the MTCS. We acknowledge that protected areas contribute significantly to prevent biodiversity loss and ensure the well-being of communities. The ecological services that they provide, among others, clean air, variety of food sources, clean water supply, and protection from natural disasters. Hence, there's a need to protect and sustainably manage these resources for the continued benefit of our future generations. Many protected areas also contain the natural resources that are the source of livelihood for the people in the respective area. We should do better to engage and empower indigenous people and local communities living in and around protected areas as active participants in conservation activities. Malaysia continues to make advances towards fulfilling our shared global commitments on protecting biodiversity. Since 1938, when Taman Negara National Park, the first protected area in the country, was declared, and until today, Malaysia continues to allocate areas for protection. As an example, the Department of Wildlife and National Parks established a community organizing steering committee for Crow Wildlife Reserve in Pahang. This establishment is an effort to empower the local communities in safeguarding as well as utilizing sustainably the potential that Crow Wildlife Reserves has to offer, especially in generating socio-economic impacts through ecotourism activities. Nonetheless, protected areas that are efficiently and effectively managed require adequate financial resources. Existing financing is insufficient to manage protected areas. Other challenges include identifying and designating additional sites, lack of incentives for state governments, lengthy designation process, lack of common standards for protected areas, and suboptimal management of existing protected areas. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last few decades, forest management in Malaysia has witnessed a gradual change from the traditional approach of managing forest resources for timber production to that of multiple use of forests. It is increasingly recognized that the forest ecosystem provides important support in social, economic, and cultural life. Therefore, the government has been giving increasing attention to the social aspects of forestry development. Poverty, whether absolute or relative, remains to plague forest-dependent indigenous people and local communities. Currently, social forestry practices have been expanded to other activities to include rehabilitation of coastal areas, ecotourism and recreational parks, establishment of nurseries, as well as awareness and education programs to raise awareness among IPLCs. These initiatives are aimed to uplift the community livelihoods, improve productivity of degraded land and forest cover, and to raise the public awareness on the importance of conserving biodiversity. This is in line with the government's focus to continue uplifting the living standards of these communities, who are also a part of the bottom 40, the B40 income group of Malaysia's population. Ladies and gentlemen, notably, Malaysia has implemented two national initiatives, namely the Central Forest Spine in Peninsular Malaysia and the Heart of Borneo in Sabah and Sarawak, to protect the forest ecosystems, major habitats, while building resilience of our forests to climate change and increasing connectivity and addressing fragmentation. The CFS covers an area of approximately 5.3 million hectares, over 40% of the total terrestrial area, and over 91% of forest areas in Peninsular Malaysia. It supplies 90% of the population's water supply through its numerous watersheds and harbors the remaining population of our Harimau Malaya and many other iconic mammals, as well as other precious flora and fauna. Additionally, the CFS also provides other services such as livelihood source, climate regulation, soil protection, and carbon storage and sequestration. However, the main challenge faced in implementing CFS is related to land use issues in the CFS ecological corridors with state land and private land status. In addition, land use changes that occur in the field are often found to be different from the CFS ecological corridor master plan, and this affects the implementation of CFS and the rationale of CFS. Therefore, adherence to the objectives of the CFS master plan implementation, maintaining sustainable development without prioritization the importance of biodiversity and wildlife conservation remains complicated. The success of CFS requires the cognizance and partnership of all levels of government, the private sector, and also the local communities. Under the Heart of Borneo initiative, various conservation efforts and activities have been implemented in Sabah and Sarawak. One of the key achievements is the expansion of the Heart of Borneo area. Sabah has increased the area of TPA within the HOB area from 0.55 million hectares in 2007 to 1.46 million hectares in 2020. Meanwhile, Sarawak in 2018 has increased its HOB area from 2.1 million hectares to 2.7 million hectares. And at the national level, Malaysia has also embarked on a nationwide reforestation program in fragmented areas to ensure the biological connectivity. One of them is the Greening Malaysia Agenda through the 100 million tree planting campaign within 5 years, from 2021 to 2025, with the slogan, "Our trees, our lives. As of 15 August 2021, approximately 8 months into our campaign, 13.3 million trees from 725 species have been planted by the government, the private sector, and the community throughout the country. This campaign is still at its infant stage and still needs to garner more support from all sectors. To enable greater implementation of forest conservation, as well as enhancing the sustainable management of forests, adequate and substantial technical and financial resources are needed for its success. Malaysia will continue to explore opportunities in assessing support from developed countries and international organizations. Malaysia has introduced the Ecological Fiscal Transfer, or EFT, for biodiversity conservation mechanism to incentivize state governments to protect and expand forest reserves and protected areas. Malaysia has also developed a finance framework under the REDD Plus mechanism. The REDD Plus finance framework, or RFF, will incentivize activities to keep our forests standing. In addition, it will also help deliver other environmental and socio-economic benefits and contribute towards sustainable land use system in the long term. The RFF is a policy approach with positive incentive to state government and private sector. It consists of two components, which is the Forest Conservation Certificates, or FCC, a non-market mechanism, and the Forest Carbon Offsets, the FCO, a carbon market mechanism. The RFF will be the platform to allow the private sector to invest into forest protection efforts in Malaysia. All the three components will support the implementation of the National REDD Plus strategy, the National Policy on Biological Diversity 2016-2025, the Malaysia's Forest Policy, as well as the Nationally Determined Contributions, the NDC, under the UNFCCC. The issuance of these certificates will be based on robust carbon standards and will be coordinated by the Malaysia Forest Fund, MFF, which has been established under the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. MFF will serve as a platform for channeling finance towards high-impact forest activities that catalyze climate change and sustainable development goals. Ladies and gentlemen, as a party to the Convention on Biological Diversity, Malaysia is obliged to develop national strategies, plans, and programs by taking measures for the conservation and sustainable use of biological resources. The National Policy on Biological Diversity calls for 20% of our land surface and inland waters to be conserved as protected areas or other effective area-based conservation measures, or OECM, by the year 2025. Malaysia has passed the Access to Biological Resource and Benefit Sharing Act 2017 and has successfully acceded to the Nagoya Protocol in 2019. The Act has been enforced in December 2020 to regulate the use of biological resources, address issues of biopiracy, and ensure that monetary and non-monetary benefits from the access of biological resources are shared equitably, especially among the indigenous people and local communities. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I call upon the collective spirit and strength of all of you to conserve our precious biodiversity. I strongly believe that we are able to achieve the ultimate goal of all nations living in harmony with nature by 2050. Let us ensure that our future generations will enjoy biodiversity and its benefit as much as we are now. Once again, thank you, MNS, for inviting me to this auspicious event, and may all present today gain the benefit from the knowledge shared in this symposium. Thank you and be safe, and let's be more vigilant and keep each other safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dato. That was absolutely wonderful. I'm so glad that we are sort of achieving a lot of targets that we really want to achieve. And hopefully we will progress further and make this planet a much beautiful place. Now, it gives me a great pleasure to now invite the President of the Malaysian Nature Society, Professor Dr. Ahmad Ismail, to give his welcome remarks. Please take it away, Professor Dr. Ahmad. Professor, I think you're muted at the moment. Could you unmute yourself? Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Vanessa. Assalamualaikum yang berbahagia Datuk Zorina binti Pawante, Secretary General Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. Berbahagia Professor Dr. Andy Chan Tak Ye, Vice Provost of the University of Nottingham, Malaysia. Berbahagia Dr. Muhammad Roslan bin Sulaiman, Vice Chancellor, University Putra Malaysia, esteemed academician, expert, community engagement leaders, and conservationists, Tan Sri, Puan Sri, Datuk, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Symposium on Multi-Stakeholders Engagement in Forest Protected Area Governance for Conservation and Livelihoods. On behalf of Malaysian Nature Society, I would like to thank University of Nottingham, Malaysia and University Putra Malaysia for jointly organizing this symposium. I also like to thank Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources and Ministry of Environment and Water for their support. This symposium is also celebrating 80 years of MNS, Malaysian Nature Society, 20 years Nottingham University, Malaysia, and 50 years of UPM, University Putra Malaysia, as mentioned by the chairperson just now. The main objective of this symposium are bringing all together for the forests and protected areas conservation and sharing information on the stakeholders participating in ensuring the sustainability of our natural environment. 8 sessions for the policies to governance, environmental issues to stakeholders participation, and from community forests to gender empowerment will be debated. I hope at the end of this symposium, after a series of idea exchange and panel discussion, some conclusion can be made for the multi-stakeholders engagement in forest protected area governance for the conservation and livelihoods. The involvement of stakeholders in forest governance need to be systematically recognized through policies, rules, knowledge, and financially equipped for the sustainability of local community livelihood. We heard from the General Secretary just now, there is some allocation and support by the government for this initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, MNS have been involved with local communities for many activities. Our annual activities such as Asian Waterbird Census, World Wetland Days, Raptor Watch, My Garden Birds, Festival of Wings, and many more, always involve local communities. The local communities were trained and form a team as a volunteer to run the activities with the guidance of the experts among the MNS members. All activities mentioned were run for more than 10 years. So we will see some of them are very fruitful and show some good results. This model needs to be enhanced and involved directly in the protected area governance. The symposium was originally planned to be held in June 2020, but due to pandemic COVID-19, the symposium was postponed until today, and now we run it virtually. I would like to thank to all participants, presenters, chairperson of the session, and distinguished guests for your support. Participants from more than 10 countries are involved in this symposium. This is something like, I'm happy to hear that many countries internationally participating in this symposium. Thank you also to the Secretariat for their hard work to make this symposium success. And once again, before I end my speech, I would like to thank the University of Northern Malaysia and University Putra Malaysia for the collaboration, organizing this symposium, and CASA and KETSA for supporting the event. Thank you and enjoy the symposium. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Ahmad Ismail, for that warm welcome. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our next person here. He is Professor Andy Chantaki, Vice Provost of Research and Knowledge Exchange at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia, to share a few words. Please take away, Professor Andy.
Thank you, Vanessa. Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon, Dr. Ahmad Ismail, distinguished colleagues from MSN, UPM, UNM, organizers of the symposium, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the University of Nottingham, Malaysia, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the Symposium on Multi-Stakeholders Engagement in Forest Protected Area Governance for Conservation and Livelihoods, co-organized by UNM, University Putra Malaysia, UPM, and its distinguished NGO, Malaysian Nature Society, MNS. As the two premier research universities in Malaysia, together with the distinguished effort from MNS, we're proud to provide this important symposium forum for all participants for fruitful academic discussion. This symposium aims to explore the state of multi-stakeholders engagement and associated forest protected areas conservation outcomes, focusing primarily in tropical countries, which would help to recommend important policy guidelines for pluralistic forest protected area governance in Malaysia. It intends to bring relevant practitioners, community people, researchers, policymakers, academics, and students together to discuss current practices, field outcomes, challenges, and way forward. This symposium brings together everyone, but most importantly, the movers and shakers of the society, like MNS and the various policymakers to make things happen. I'm sure this is an extremely important network and academic exchange platform for all. Most importantly, this will plant the seed, just as the theme of the symposium for the future, our research students, and allow them to grow and to be nurtured to become a full-fledged academic and environmentalist to serve the society. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizing committee to bring the symposium to life. This is especially true during this long pandemic when all members of the organizing committee has to take an extra mile to make things happen. I salute all members' effort, both staff and students, for all the effort. Finally, the symposium would not be possible without the excellent papers and presentation contributed by our participants. We thank you all for your contributions in whatever form. We hope that this symposium will continue to stimulate research in the areas. I wish you all success in this event, and I declare this event open. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Andy. You are indeed so right. We need to plant that seed of love for environment for the young generation, especially. And I do hope to see a lot of young, warriors, green warriors coming out. So now I've got another person here that will be giving me a welcome remarks. I would now like to invite the Vice Chancellor of University Putra Malaysia, Professor Dr. Muhammad Roslan bin Sulaiman, to give his welcome remarks. Take it away, Professor Dr. Muhammad.
The Honorable Representative Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, Professor Dr. Ahmad Ismail, President of Malaysian Nature Society, Professor Andy Chan, Vice Provost, Research and Knowledge Exchange, University of Nottingham, Malaysia, Professor Dr. Makoto, Dean, Graduate School of Human Sciences, Wasade University, Dr. Urami, Editor-in-Chief, Journal of Sustainable Forestry, Associate Professor, College of Forestry, Guangzhou University, Dr. Ham Bahadur, Project Regional Coordinator, BirdLife International. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum and good afternoon. University Putra Malaysia is happy to collaborate with Malaysian Nature Society and University of Nottingham, Malaysia in organizing this symposium on multi-stakeholder engagement in forest or protected area governance for conservation and livelihoods. This symposium is very important to share information and experience in the involvement of stakeholders for better forest governance. University Putra Malaysia always follow through all issues related to environment and nature protection. Issues on climate change, loss of biodiversity, and benefit to ecosystem services are well discussed at UPM throughout our teaching, research, and involving stakeholders activities. UPM also always have ideas exchange programs and provide services to authorities and public on issues related to forest protection, biodiversity conservation, and management of the forest for the human benefit. In general, UPM involved directly in systematic training program and integrated research approach in managing our ecosystem either naturally or engaging communities. Since UPM established with important faculties of forestry, agriculture, veterinary medicine, and basic sciences 50 years ago, we are already giving training to students related to forestry, including forest governance, conservation, zoonotic diseases, importance in agriculture and medicine, and livelihood of local community. Until now, UPM continued to progress in academic supporting all environmental issues, including Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 2030. I hope this symposium will benefit all of us in managing our forests and natural resources. We can share all the information and exchange ideas to achieve the objective of the symposium. With the involvement of the international organizations such as BirdLife International and European Union, I hope the issue of forest governance not just locally acted but internationally collaborating in supporting forest governance in the world. Thank you very much. Enjoy the symposium.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Muhammad Roslan. It's indeed really good that there's still continued discussion and we're having more students being involved with various stakeholders. So I really hope that continues on for generations to come. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we would now move on to the tree planting ceremony. Initially, we wanted to do this physically, live on site, but of course, everybody is aware due to the pandemic. We are thankful that the various partners have agreed to video their tree planting act at their respective places safely. This is a symbolic act to commemorate the launch of the symposium and a celebration of the anniversary of the symposium partners. So please enjoy the video.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having us to plant this tree as a symbol, as a symbolic gesture for the success of the symposium. So on behalf of the University of Nottingham, Malaysia, we are very, very proud to organize this particular symposium in time when environmental awareness is very, very important. As I said, this is a symbolic gesture that we're doing so as to do the opening for the symposium. So I wish you the best of luck and I wish you a good symposium. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. All right.
Okay, I done with my plant. So this is in supporting the green initiative and in support of your symposium. Hope you enjoy it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is symbolic for our symposium. I'm planting here Murbau tree, a Malaysian national tree, to show to the public, to the future generation, as their commitment protect and conserve the nature. We are here today to discuss in detail about how to protect our forest, how to improve our forest governance, how to involve the stakeholders participating in the forest governance for livelihood and for the future generation. I hope at the end of the symposium, we can conclude something to declare about how to improve the forest governance and livelihood. Thank you. Enjoy the symposium.
What a wonderful gesture to encourage more people to plant trees. They are extremely important for our planet, so I really do hope that more people can plant them as well. Anyway, I'd like to do a lot of thank yous right now. This symposium is made possible thanks to University of Nottingham, Malaysia, University Putra, Malaysia, My Forest Watch, BirdLife International, the European Union, International Green Tech and Eco Products Exhibition and Conference Malaysia, IGEM, and the support of members of the Malaysian Nature Society. We also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge a dear friend that was instrumental to the birth of this symposium. He is none other than the late Mr. Balu Perumal, Head of Conservation for the Malaysian Nature Society. He will be greatly missed, and we will continue to do him proud by carrying on his legacy. In honor of his contribution to the conservation of our natural resources, here is a video encapsulating his journey in the world of conservation. Thank you so much for sharing this moment with us. And once again, a big thank you to all our partners for making this symposium possible. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited because we have some amazing key speakers to kickstart our symposium. Please note that if time permits, we will have a live Q&A segment at the end. Nevertheless, do feel free to share your questions and the speakers will try to answer all of them. And if we cannot address all of them during the session, you will receive a reply via email. Don't worry, okay? Do see a question box in the platform. If you don't see the question box right there, do refresh the page and you should be able to submit your questions. All right, without further ado, I am pleased to introduce our first speaker. He is the Professor of Environmental Sociology and Dean of Graduate School of Human Sciences at Waseda University, Japan. Please welcome Professor Dr. Makoto Inoue.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is a great honor for me to be given this opportunity to present here as one of the keynote speakers. I wish to express my deep gratitude to organizers, especially Dr. Tapan, University of Nottingham, Malaysia, Dr. Shaizwan, University Putra Malaysia, and Dr. Balu, Malaysian Nature Society, for their great efforts to prepare the symposium even in COVID-19 crisis. Today, I would like to talk about significance of participation in protected area governance, implications from case studies in the heart of Borneo for 15 minutes. I'll talk you about an introduction section first. Haro Borneo is one of the hotspots of the world ecosystem conservation, but forest coverage declined to 57% in 2006. So WWF initiated conservation activities. As a result, February 2007, an international agreement was signed by the government of Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei. I believe the following recognitions are commonly shared. Establishment of protected area is important, but it causes conflict with local people when introducing strict restriction of their livelihood. Collaborative governance is important, and point is what the participation should really be. But the problem is that we can find inconsistency between theory and practice. Theoretically, the participation is not the principal purpose of protected area management. But practically, the participation is essential for the success of protected area management. Then the objective of my talk is to clarify the significance of participation in terms of theory by literature review and practice by case studies. As an analytical framework of my talk, I apply two contrast concepts. The first one is participation as means. It's something like a tool for achieving better protected area management, and efficiency is important. The other concept is participation as ends. It's referred to empower the people and help them to make decisions towards improving their own livelihood. The second section is theoretical points based on the literature review. The first, discussion on protected area management in Japanese academia. Japanese scholars had an active discussion about dichotomy of the national park. The first category is state-owned national parks, in which the government conducted exclusive management. We can see typical cases in USA. The other one is designated national parks. The land is owned by various stakeholders, so collaborative management for restriction of land use change and control of utilization is very important. We can see the typical cases in UK and Japan. Based on such a legacy of the discussion, national parks in the tropics is characterized as weak state-owned national parks. It means to have the attribute of formally state-owned parks, but substantially and partially designated parks. In the tropics, both for participation as means and ends are important. Ultimately, participation as ends will be intensified. The second is global discussion on participatory forest management in the tropics. I ever discussed that when appropriate project plan is elaborated, participation as ends and means can be achieved together. But simultaneous achievement is not always realizable because the level of participation varies in each case. Harashina pointed out it is important whether meaningful response among multi-stakeholder is done or not. And Inoue conceptualized 6 levels of participation based on critical review of international scholars, and also argued that at least partnership and ideally self-mobilization is needed for collaborative governance. For collaborative governance, both participation as means and ends are important, and ultimately participation as ends will be intensified. The third is points in the field of international law. In 1992, Principle 10 of Rio Declaration on Environment and Development was declared. Its main principle of participation. And in 1998, the Aarhus Convention was signed to guarantee effectively green access rights. The green access right consists of access to information, public participation in decision-making, and access to justice in environmental matters. And in 2010, Bali Guidelines was adopted at UNEP conference in order to promote the green access rights, though not legally binding. It's important for the state to ensure and guarantee the green access rights. Participation as ends is significant. The green access right shows institutional and legal prerequisites. The third section is practical aspects. Outline of comparative studies. Our research sites were Kayam and Taran National Park in North Kalimantan, Indonesia, and Kinabalu National Park in Sabah, Malaysia. We collected data by interview and documents and literature reviews. This is the scenery of research sites for both of Indonesian side and Sabah and Malaysian side. The national legal system in Indonesia. A Ministry Degree 2004 on Collaborative Management of Conservation Area is regarded as turning point to introduce people's participation. And also Ministry Degree in 2006 on Guideline for Zoning National Park allows set aside certain area as special zone for community use such as cultivation. And at last, Law Number 32, 2009 on Environmental Protection and Management is the comprehensive framework to specify the green access rights. It means participation is legally ensured and guaranteed in Indonesia. And Sabah, Malaysia, Kinabalu National Park regulations and also park enactment, we couldn't find provision for participation. And they say that 10 years park management plan include relevant statements on people's participation, but it is not opened. So we couldn't find evidence. It means that participation is not legally ensured in Sabah, Malaysia. So this is the method to evaluate field reality. Following Bali guidelines by UNEP, we use the following three important aspects of Bali guideline. The first one is notification, and second, duty of states and role of enterprise, and the third is due account and public announcement, though I omit the explanation detail. Next, result of case studies. This table shows the result of the case studies by using three important aspects of the Bali guidelines as explained in the previous slide. I describe only 2 points not to be mentioned in the next slide. Regarding the duty of state and role of enterprise, in Kayam National Park, multi-stakeholder policy board was established and functioned. And regarding due account, in Kinabalu National Park, some of the villagers who have farmlands inside the park obtained special permission to cultivate the land for 30 years. Summary: in Indonesia, legal system certainly supports people's participation. Land use demarcation and land use restriction of different categories came into agreement after claim by the people. So participation as means is ensured and realized. On the other hand, the local communities have access to the park resources for livelihood, and their authority for decision-making were approved to some extent. So we can consider the situation to be participation as ends, though only few tourists visit the park due to remoteness and inconvenience of public transportation. In Sabah, Malaysia, legal system doesn't support the participation, but villagers were able to successfully minimize the restriction of their agriculture and religious activities in the park area as a result of flexible local responses by the park authority and staff. Local people in some villages actually introduced ecotourism to obtain income. So participation as means and ends are informally realized, but such arrangement is ad hoc basis and not so stable. In order to support greater efforts by the park officers and rangers, and to ensure the condition in order to avoid disadvantages for the people, the state government can elaborate a legal system for local people's participation in the park management. Conclusions. We understand that participation in national park management is certainly regarded as means for the government to construct a basis for national park management effectively by avoiding critics and sabotage by the people. At the same time, however, the participation is also considered as the ends or purpose for the people to provide a necessary condition for their development and empowerment. It is interesting to know that participation as means can be changed to the ends when the villagers' participation in park management empower the villagers and enhance the level of their authority for decision-making. Participation as means and ends are not fully separated, but partially interrelated. To fully achieve both of means and ends, the participation needs to be integrated into national legal system, or public participation need to be stipulated as clauses in relevant laws, based on the understanding that the participation can be ensured as substantial rights. And also acknowledgement is written here. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer as far as I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Makoto. I'm really sure there are going to be a whole load of questions for you right after this. So now we're going to move on to our next speaker. We have a very lovely lady. She is Dr. Yuromi Manage Gudale, the editor-in-chief of Journal and Sustainable Forestry Associate Professor at the College of Forestry at Guangxi University, China. Please give her a warm welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here at the Symposium on Multi-Stakeholders Engagement in Forest Protected Area Governance for Conservation and Livelihoods. My presentation today is going to be on the research on involvement of stakeholders in sustainable forestry. I would like to give a global perspective from publication trends on this topic. My presentation will have 3 parts to it. I will present some key takeaways from 3 important recent reports first, then provide some data on recent research on changes in publication rates and research productivity in conservation science and forestry, and finally discuss some future directions, specifically on innovation and problem solving. The Unseen Forest reports state that when granted indigenous people or local communities local control, forests are generally better protected than industrial scale companies do, and even better than many protected areas have. This assessment finds and describes approaches that could achieve wider recognition and spread of sustainable forest management practices by indigenous peoples or local communities. They present an assessment to recognize and spread the sustainable forest management approaches by indigenous peoples or local communities from different community forest contexts, and present their main strengths and limitations across the full spectrum of community forestry contexts, from the forest core to the urban forest-linked processing centers. Before we delve into these, there are some caveats. First, they caution us to be flexible and careful in seeking to apply knowledge gained in one context to the different specifics of another context. Second, although these are presented roughly divided into landscape and supply chain approaches, it is noted that some approaches could be described as both landscape governance and supply chain options. The landscape governance options in the right panel here are presented as those that are focused on improving decision-making associated with particular forest resources and geography. Many of these approaches are complementary to one another, while there is less pressing need for further innovation and more need for concerned action to upscale some of these options, especially in the cases where, as said, they exist only as pilots. Further research and investment is warranted in exploring each of these options. Our experts and stakeholders gathered here today come from different countries that are governed by different legal and jurisdictional requirements, yet needing to adhere to global standards, especially when it comes to economic purposes. How are these approaches applicable to each situation? The authors of the report welcome our reaction, contestation, and ideas that can usefully take forward any of the initial conclusions in their assessment. Supply chain options are those associated with improving behavior along chains of value derived from forest products and services. 7 options are listed in the right panel here. It's important to note that the authors carried out this analysis before COVID-19 pandemic. It would be meaningful for this audience to evaluate this analysis in light of the current situation. Links in complex supply chains become swiftly and painfully evident during the pandemic. And smallholders and community groups in forest farm landscapes are continuing to produce food as well as many other products and services that are vital to the survival of populations near and far. How do we recognize their contribution? This is one of the questions that the authors pose. It is also a good question for us to ponder and discuss at this symposium. Furthermore, they state that there are several cross-cutting approaches that shape any of the other options beneficially. These include social and institutional investments in the building of accountable local organizations and they focus on the need to build credible local assessments of forest management, to empower groups to assert their forest management credentials in an innocent until proven guilty format rather than the reverse. The need for fairer distribution of costs and benefits of community forestry with less burden for communities and more beneficial support and action from government are also presented. Lastly, they state that all approaches require stronger partnerships between communities and external agencies in a progressive community of practice. In this table, they summarize the degree to which each approach is applicable to different community forest contexts and present some of the strengths and limitations of each. Out of the 6 forest goals outlined in the Global Forest Goals Report, the one that is most directly connected to our symposium on multi-stakeholders engagement in forest protected area governance for conservation and livelihoods is Goal 5, which is to promote governance frameworks to implement sustainable forest management, including through the United Nations Forest Instrument, and enhance the contribution of forests to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. When this report was conducted, countries elaborated a number of obstacles they were working to overcome. Key challenges ranged from broader global issues such as growing impacts of climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation, to challenges like forest financing, illegal trade, and capacity building. They also note that lack of standardized and comparable data and statistics is a big problem. For example, no agreed upon standard definition of what constitutes as forest degradation, or how to measure resilience and adaptive capacity of forest ecosystems, or socioeconomic benefits that forests provide to critical development issues. These were very difficult to define and clearly measure. Lack of reliable data on forest funding due to limited understanding of the financial landscape was also an issue. The State of the World's Forest Report explored the linkages between forests, biodiversity, and people. Many of the benefits for us from forests are very familiar to this audience. I will point out 2 pieces of data from this report. The first is that more than half of the world's forests are found in only 5 countries: the Russian Federation, Brazil, Canada, the United States of America, and China. And 2/3, 66% of the forests are found in 10 countries. Second, in terms of changes in forest area, Africa had the highest net loss of forest area in the period 2010 to 2020, followed by South America, and Asia showed the highest net gain in forest area in this same period, followed by Oceania and Europe. The key takeaway is that it calls for bold and immediate action to prevent, halt, and reverse the loss of forests and their biodiversity. This is because, based on information compiled for this report, it is evident that most of the goals and targets related to forest biodiversity have not been met, and that the related SDGs are not on track to be met by 2030. With this background, I would like to transition and present to you 2 studies on the changes in conservation and forestry publication rates and research productivity that I have collaborated on with Dr. Christos Mamides and Eben Goodale at Guangzhou University and other colleagues. It is indisputable that tropical countries have higher biodiversity and high threats, but tropical countries are also generally poorer, with less investment in higher education. Large changes have occurred economically in the world over the last 30 years, with developing countries becoming more successful than the developed world in terms of publications. The publication industry itself has also changed. Many more publications, new business models like open access. These changes have influenced the proportion of the international conservation literature contributed by developing tropical countries. In our research on the assessment of publication rates, we looked at the past and current status of geographic diversity in the international conservation literature over 30 years in comparison to other fields. We also looked at present acceptance rate data from prominent journals broken down by the country of corresponding authorship. Our results show that while the proportion of articles in all fields contributed by low and medium income countries increased over time, the percentage of conservation articles contributed by corresponding authors from low-income countries was actually declining. Manuscripts by authors from low-income countries were less than half as likely to be published as those from high-income countries. This is not merely a language issue, though that was a factor. By looking at the 12 conservation journals separately, we found that in 11 out of the 12 journals, income was more important than language in predicting acceptance rate. Two other factors, per capita submittal rates, average impact factor for accepted manuscripts, were also lower in non-high income countries. Compared to other subject areas, conservation lags significantly in the change in this measure over time. Traditionally, conservation tended to be overrepresented in low-income countries. In our study, 4.6% of articles in 1996 for conservation was there, compared to 0.2% for all subject areas that were analyzed. But this tendency has diminished over time. Our data shows that 2.7% of articles in 2013 were low-income countries compared to 0.6% for all other subjects. If we do the same analysis for the forestry subject area, the situation for forestry is very similar to conservation science, but it actually falls below conservation. The rate of change in forestry publications also shows similar results to conservation publications, which tells us that while these two subject areas are very important for the health of our planet, research representation in these two areas in published literature has slightly declined. In asking why, what drives these trends, we discovered that deforestation or afforestation cannot predict forestry publications, which is in the first graph here. Basically, as seen in the middle graph, the number of publications increased with absolute forest cover. When controlled for population and land area, however, there is no relationship with publications. The most important factor, as presented in the third graph, is national income. National income predicts the publication contribution in forestry. This is not surprising, as greater national income also provides greater opportunities for research funding through national research and development instruments. So, where's the research done and by whom? Who are the stakeholders? The proportion of field studies in the tropics and subtropics conducted by tropical or subtropical institutions, as judged by corresponding authorship, which was a mix, did not significantly change between early, middle, and recent time periods for our study duration. That is the first figure here. However, when we moved to research conducted in temperate sites, it was almost exclusively conducted by temperate institutions. So there's a significant difference in stakeholder engagement in these two regions. Why is this inquiry important? Given greater opportunities elsewhere, students leave developing tropical countries for education, and those who leave for these opportunities may not come back. Science tells us that local stakeholders are particularly effective in conservation. Therefore, this brain drain will reduce conservation effectiveness. In contrast, stronger institutions for education in tropical countries can develop people who are aware of the need for conservation, who are local. Not only in academia, this should be done also in government and in NGO sectors and elsewhere. We need to develop a strong stakeholder base for problem solving. These stakeholders also need to be trained in their technological innovation capabilities. These have to be improved. The 7 capabilities, learning, research and development, manufacturing, marketing, organization, and strategic planning, all have to go hand in hand and improve for stakeholders that are local, from research scientists to indigenous people or local communities. Our research calls for re-examining journal policies to encourage regional diversity in the conservation forestry literature. More broadly, institutes of higher education in developing tropical nations need to be prioritized as targets for conservation funding. For individual research scientists who are already locally present, looking for collaborators is an important next step. As educators, we need to focus on innovation and training the next generation, and we all collectively need to find ways to be adaptive in our decision making due to the broader challenges, the unpredictable challenges that we face, especially climate change and COVID-19 pandemic. This brings me to the end of my presentation. And I would like to thank Dr. Tapan Kumar Nath, Associate Professor at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia, Dr. Zaizwan Zamir Zulkifli, Senior Lecturer, University of Putra, Malaysia, Dr. Balu Perumal, Head of Conservation, Malaysian Nature Society, and my collaborators, Dr. Evan Goodell and Christos Mamides, who worked on the research part of this presentation. I look forward to your questions, and I look forward to engaging with you during these 5 days. Thank you again for having me here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Uromi. I really do hope that more publications, can come around for people in the tropical area. We can learn more about what we need to do. And I guess, like this symposium, awareness is going to be so key. So I'm going to move on to our next speaker right now. Our next speaker is the Regional Project Coordinator at BirdLife International. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Hoom Gurong. Thank you. Dr. Hoom, if you could unmute yourself, we could hear you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd just like to share my screen. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, all the friends, colleagues around the globe and in Malaysia. It is a great privilege for me to speak about the multi-stakeholders engagement in forest and protection areas. Why forest and protection areas governance is critical, and why we have to engage people or different stakeholders. To me, it is basically because conservation is everybody's business. It's not just the government or the NGOs. So as we have both, like one is protected areas, one is forest, I like to give the big picture. So around the globe, there are about 14.7% of the world, the Earth's surface, are protected by the protected areas, which are special and unique places on Earth. So they have a special and dedicated and management strategies that help to achieve the ecosystem services and also the cultural values. So BirdLife partnership around the globe in more than 115 countries and territories work in the protected areas as an important bird and biodiversity or key biodiversity areas. So why protected area governance is very important? Globally, there are 4 types of governance in terms of protected area management. One is governance by the government, including some government lands managed by the NGOs. For example, Nepal's Annapurna Conservation Area is a government land managed by the NGO. Second is shared governance, which is basically a joint management or collaborative approach. And third is private governance, maybe particularly in many African countries, where private companies are also involved in the management of protected areas. And finally, the indigenous people and communities who live in the forest or nearby the forest, who have a special connection with nature. So within this governance system, there are 6 management categories with different objectives, starting from strict nature reserves where people are not allowed to enter, only for scientific research and study. And second is like national parks where people can go and enjoy as part of tourism and recreation. So ultimately, the final 6 is the managed resource, which is mostly like conservation area where people can live there, they can do the resource management that can create a win-win situation. So now I'd like to go briefly about the pillars and principles of forest governance. There are 3 pillars of forest governance, starting with the policy, legal instruments, and institutions that help for planning and decision-making process, and ultimately implementation or enforcement or compliance of the government's rules and regulation. So there are 6 principles of good governance. We also apply for forest governance, starting from accountability, effectiveness, efficiency, equity, who gets what, and participation or engagement, and also transparency. So it is not just to cut down the trees, but also see the pillars and principles of forest governance that will lead to a sustainable forest management. So I like to now talk a little about bring the regional perspective on the forest governance project that supported by the European Union and led by BirdLife International with our national partners, Burung Indonesia, Haribon Foundation in the Philippines, Malaysian Natural Society, Technically Conservation Alliance, and 2 technical partners, UPNG and also CIT from UK. So the main, project sites in 4 countries like, Belum Temenggong in Malaysia or Harda Borneo, the 2 sites, 3 sites in the Philippines, and one site in Papua New Guinea, Torrensili Mountain Range, and Melville Landscape. So these are the project sites where the forest governance projects have been implementing through our national partners. The main objective is basically a long-term engagement of non-state actors or NGOs or CBOs in forest monitoring, planning, and policy processes. So the project try to support the SDG goal 15, forest, and which is also very important to see from SDG goal 13 from climate action. So from the lens of climate change, because forest and climate change are interrelated. So it's very important to see the objectives from big picture of SDG. The project have been working since 2017 to achieve 4 outcomes. First is capacity building, supporting and working with the local communities or different stakeholders at national, provincial, or local level, where we are supporting. The project partners are working for 3 C. The first C is trying to see the forest coverage, whether it is decreasing or increasing. Basically, generally speaking, forest loss is the main concern. So the forest loss. Second loss is the forest condition. Forest condition is the health of the forest. How healthy the forest is, not just to have a forest or trees, but how healthy is also very important. That matters. And also the third is the carbon stock, from climate lens, very important. So carbon assessment. So second is to see the forest governance angles from transparency or access to information and accountability that will help for conservation and management of forest, including the key biodiversity areas. Third is to build a sustainable network within the country who are well informed, who can decide, see right or wrong things. So it's not within the country, but also beyond the project countries at a regional level, where cooperation and collaboration can be done through exchange of information. So finally, linking with the participation of the non-state actors for national and provincial forest policy processes, including FLECT, BP, and RED+. So these 4 buildings, the blocks are the outcomes are trying to link, starting from capacity building to policy formulation. So why forest governance is so important? It matters a lot because it's about power. It is about the ownership, who have the resources, who own the resources, very important. So from our regional perspective, from the project countries, for example, Papua New Guinea, 3% of the forest is owned by the government, and 97% is by the what we call the private ownership, means particularly indigenous people, different tribes, different indigenous community groups who own the management of and the ownership of the forest. But in contrast, like in the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia, with more than 85% of forests are owned by the government. So the government has the power and authority in terms of driving the forest governance processes. So this is very important as we come to the stakeholders engagement. As I said earlier, why do we have to engage different stakeholders? Because conservation is everybody's business. So governments, central governments, each country have a different government system, either central government or state governments or local governments. For example, in Malaysia, the forests belong to the state governments. So it's very important to engage, to work, to complement what our partners are doing with the government's policy framework for forest governance. Another part is the non-state actors or the stakeholders, particularly indigenous communities or CBOs. For example, in Papua New Guinea, the local people are the true owners of the forest. They live nearby the forest. So they have more say in forest management, and so their role is very important. Secondly, NGOs who are usually more flexible can bring more ideas, innovative ideas, and they can engage for forest governance. And lastly, because forest timbers also create green jobs, also need to invest and also engage the private sectors. So I just like to highlight here why we had to monitor forest. So, BirdLife has been, working since 2000 and monitoring the important bird and biodiversity areas, where this is one example. We have been working in all project countries, and also this is example from, Malaysia, which is what we call the one of the, IBA important bird and biodiversity areas. Malaysia has 55 IBAs or key biodiversity areas. So this is one example you can see here. This is also, one, Royal Bellum State Park. You can see more green, means the forest is in better condition. But if you go to the Kedah, here you can see more red or you can see more orange. So that means more, forest loss is happening there. So from looking from the sky from, BirdLife's Google Earth engine, it will help policymakers to understand what is happening on the ground. And our partners on the ground go and monitor actually what is happening there. So we link macro in terms of the, remote sensing, GIS information, and also try to see on the ground actually so that we can verify. So this, trail the, forest loss situation in Ulumuda Forest Park. So why Ulumuda is very important? I'm trying to link here forest, water, and livelihoods. So 160 hectares, Ulumuda forest, very close to Thailand border. And the main thing is the watershed area, water catchment. That provides as much as 96% of Kedah's and 80% of Penang's water supply. If we don't protect the watershed, then there will be a water crisis in these two states. Having said that, sustainable logging is going there, both legal and illegal. Also, it threatens the watershed area, affecting the quality and volume of its water output. That means clearing of more forest patches and unsustainable logging means it will create more siltation into Ulumuda's lakes and rivers. The important thing here, what we have to understand is it will threaten or it will affect the livelihoods of more than 4 million people if we don't protect the Ulumuda watershed. So there's always drivers of deforestation, lots of pressure, economic development versus forestry or growth, production. So there's always a mismatch, and we need to get a win-win situation, a better forest policy governance in order to avoid and long-term impact. If we have more logging, unsustainable logging, so that will create less water. And you can see here during the dry season. So in Ulumuda dry season, as I've been there myself, I can see the water level is going down. That means what will happen, the livelihood of the people. So Kedah, the rice bowl of Malaysia, provides 40% of the paddy rice needs of Malaysia, one of the cheapest rice in the world. If we don't protect the watershed, if we don't protect the forest, that means there will be less water. Less water means you will have a paddy field without water. If you just rely on rainwater, then the production will be less. So it's very important we have to interlink how forest, water, and livelihoods are connected. So for this, we need both, looking from the policy to practice. So what, BirdLife International and Malaysian Nature Society, along with our partners in each country, we have supported to, develop the policy brief that basically try to understand from the policy lens how the governance systems are working, why the engagement are very crucial, where are the gaps that will help policymakers to understand so that they can focus where are the most important things, where are the more needed things that they have to work on. So it will help to bridging the roles in addressing the sectoral gaps. In many countries or many parts of the world, there may be very good policies, but there will be a big gap in terms of implementation, or there may be less engagement of stakeholders. That means we cannot fully implement the policy. From policy to practice or practice to policy, we need a community engagement or different layers of stakeholders engagement that will help. So the multi-scalar forest governance is very critical. It will help two-way communication, understanding each other, where things can be improved, try to address the critical gaps so that the policy can be implemented on the ground, or the local people or the stakeholders will feel a sense of ownership so that they can be part and parcel of the policy work and can bring a change. So we need need to focus, and so and in the also existing institution. What I like to say here is that building on the existing strength. As you can see from our Secretary General in the opening ceremony, she brought lots of nice ideas. So it is very important that we try to build and support the existing work and complement what the NGOs can do towards the government's efforts for biodiversity conservation and forest, sustainable forest management. So efforts are needed to remove any potential barriers, because from research, from the policy dialogues, we can identify where are the barriers. We can identify where are the deficits. We can identify where are the capacity needs that people, and we can build the capacity of the non-state actors at different levels that can bring more, and sustainable, forest governance activities. So, for this is just one example of how we can link from policy to practice or practice to policy. To advocate, and Malaysian Nature Society is very strong. Our party is very strong in doing this. And so this is like this event today and the next 5 days is a part of this forest governance project that supported by the European Union and led by BirdLife International. So what I like to share today, a very announcement for every one of you. So many things are happening. We will be hosting a first Asia Pacific Forest Governance Forum by this funded by the European Union and led by BirdLife International. And in this, the forum is coordinated by CIDT, our technical partner in UK. So Malaysian Nature Society and all our national project partners are engaged in the forest governance forum. There are 4 days. So the first day is high-level panel on forest governance. So second day is exploring how transparency and accountability, as I mentioned in the beginning, about the principles of governance, forest governance. So we'll be exploring that one. Third day, try to have a public-private partnership, the role of non-state actors in forest governance. So there will be many partners who also will be making presentation on this. Then finally, so making a difference for the coming decade, next 1 decade, how we can bring things that a mechanism for sustainable change or maintaining the momentum so that each and every stakeholders. So please, already we have already announced. If you need anyone more information, I will be very, very delighted to share with you. And there will be another talk on the 26th of August, the workshop 1, where our more partners will be joining for the workshop 1. So once again, thank you very much, everyone. And I love to the live Q&A very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hum. Wow, you're so right there. It's everybody, protecting the forest, and it's the responsibility of everybody. And the thing that you talk about, policy to practice, that's ringing in my head right now. That's so true. So hopefully that will take place continuously, practice, whatever policies that we have. Now, on to our final speaker is Professor Dr. Ahmad Ismail. He is the president of the Malaysian Nature Society. I would like to welcome him right now. So please give him a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Can you help me to share screen? I can share screen now. Can you see the screen now?
Yes,
right,
we can see you beautifully.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time. You're still waiting with us. I heard about over than 120 people are watching now. So I've heard from the General Secretary and from Professor Urome, from Professor Inoue, and then just now from Dr. Hom Gurong was very interesting because he touched about the Ulu Muda, which is one of my focus of work. So now I'm going to go down to Malaysian scenario where we want to talk about empowerment of local community and business for biodiversity conservation. I will start with a little bit on national policy and biological diversity related to the focus subject, and then we talk about indigenous and local community engagement, example of Belum Temanggu and Orang Asli participation, and Sungayu local community participation. So as Malaysia launched, this was mentioned by the General Secretary earlier, National Policy of Biological Biodiversity 2016-2025. This is very important as a basis for the government to follow through, and then all the Malaysians have to understand if they want to protect our biodiversity. And then we MNS are looking closely at the national policy, and then now is 5 years after launch, we have to look how far we reach or how far we achieve all these target listed in the policy. So as we know, Malaysia is one of the top 12 biodiversity country in the world, and of course we have a lot of species. Some are unknown species, right? Estimated here 15,000 species of vascular plants and about 8,300 species in Peninsula, 12,000 in Sabah. All these numbers varies from reference which you see because there are many more species that people are looking and searching, and we need more active research for this biodiversity. And then flora, for the fauna, like 300 over species of mammals, 785 species of birds, and some report nearly 1,000 species. And rich biodiversity is very interesting for Malaysian to maintain and keep the environment so that the habitat and the area are well protected. So this is in line with our discussion today because function of the forest is very, very important, and then we can see a lot of habitat degradation of forest fragmentation and so on, introducing of alien species, pollution, poaching. All these are creating a lot of challenge for the activists, for the conservationists, for the researchers. And then of course the government who want to protect our species, our habitat, our environment, right? So we need a lot of discussion, a lot of education to increase awareness among the people, either the whole Malaysia or especially in the local area where close to the habitat of the wildlife, for example, right? So this policy, national policy in biological biodiversity 2016-2025 is very important to guide us and then to make us assess the achievement of the target that listed in their policy that I mentioned earlier. So in the topic related to indigenous people and local community, they are listed clearly in the policy, building capacity, knowledge, awareness to carry out biodiversity conservation, and to develop policy and legal instrument to empower indigenous people and local community, develop and implement community engagement program, identify and nurture local champion as catalysts for conservation action, strengthen and support community-based biodiversity monitoring and patrolling, and establish a working group on community-based management, natural resources management. So this is important, and I listed, was mentioned. Partly I heard from the General Secretary, and Dr. Hum also touched a bit on this, and MNS as one of the important agency that working on SEPA. So this all will be or can be done through the activities. So we have important topic to look at now on the function or roles of the stakeholders in this biodiversity conservation. So maybe we ask why or who are the stakeholders that should support, should involve. There are many, depend on what or who you want to list, can long list. And then if you look at the Dr. Hum presentation, between the countries also we have a different focus and adaptation to reach our objective. So all individuals or group of organization that participating in the program or like to solve the issues can participate in the program. So stakeholders is very important because they can influence the success of the project. So, for example, the General Secretary are talking about Central Forest Spine, and then later I'll show you the picture, the map. This is very important participation from the stakeholders. So institutional researchers, the data managers, people who live around the forest and depending on the forest product to support their life, among the important that we need to focus to make them or let them or bring them together, participate in our project for biodiversity conservation. So these stakeholders need to be educated, need to be have high or strong awareness on protection of the forest, and then helping us to monitor, to observe, and then report that what MNS is doing. We have a program like a group of people or citizen scientists, we call it, and then they are reporting to us through a system that we develop in MNS. But today we focus on more on indigenous people. So why forest is important was mentioned just now. Dr. Hum highlighted on Ulu Muda for water supply, and of course Ulu Muda not just supply to Kedah and Penang and Perlis, but actually to the world. When we look at the shipping activities in Penang, and you look at semiconductor production to the world, so meaning the world got benefit from the water and forest in Ulu Muda. So we should demand the whole world to look into this Ulu Muda protection and conservation, so that the industries, the activities, and livelihood can sustain, right? So forest present soil erosion. Recently, we talk about what happening in Jerai, in Kedah, and today the Prime Minister visiting the place to see how serious it is damages, right? So you see, even though the forest is not logged, but the system there, the ecology of the forest in Jerai need to look in detail. More research need to be done. So, of course, naturally, we know plants and animals are depending each other in the pollination, seed dispersal. That is the basic or fundamental ecology that we are teaching in school and university. And by now, if we have in Malaysia, if we have 20 universities or 30 universities, if they learn this, they should help to protect our forests when they are graduated. The same thing when school children Form 1, Form 2 already learn about the importance or the interaction between plants and animals for the sustainability of the ecosystem. So forests provide us with various medicine. It's all well discussed, agriculture and so on. So forest sustainability management is very important. We need to manage it. We need to understand about the plants and animals. We need to respect the local workers, the local community. We have to make sure the sustainability of the valuable incomes and work opportunities and so on. This all I mentioned earlier. So I think we can enhance this through the system that starting from the local communication, local community or population. So Malaysian Nature Society is very clear in their mission for Malaysian nature, for Malaysia's natural habitat and rich biological diversity to be effective, protected, managed, and conserved for the benefit and appreciation for all Malaysians. So it's very clear stated there. So we need work for it. And then our mission is to promote conservation, natural heritage in Malaysia. So Malaysia, MNS, as you know, one of the oldest society, 80 years old, as I mentioned earlier. And then we bond together with the Malayan Nature Journal, Naturalists. So meaning that we need values of research, we need information, we disseminate information, we educate public, we promote knowledge and awareness among the people since 80 years ago. But I still question about the rate of acceptable among the people on contamination, on the conservation of the forest. So Dr. Ho mentioned just now, in order to do that, we do many activities. Among them, we creating a program. We bring people together, discuss on the issues like what we are doing today, and we strengthen the non-actors action and action on the ground. So, for example, I give here example like strengthening non-actors involvement in the forest governance. We do a series of talks so that people learn about what we are doing and we share with experts. So we're educating people. Then now we go to what we are doing on the ground, the conservation. For example, one I tell you about Friends of Sahabat Raja Rimba, Friends of Malayan Tiger. So this was established some time ago, and then we know about the tiger are decreasing, the habitat are decreasing. Now government plan many things to double the number of population, but unfortunately they are decreasing. We do a lot of campaign. We identify already what lacking in achieving the mission. We need to look in detail the logging activities, the encroachment into the forest degradation, conflict between human and tiger or other wildlife, poaching and illegal wildlife trade. So this is cannot do from one agency. We need to involve many people. So one of the important group of people that MNS are working with is local community, and we call it Sahabat Raja Rimba, or Friend of Malayan Tiger. So I don't have to detail about what is Malayan Tiger, and we can, this is people know already. So now this is the map that I said I want to show you. This is, you can get it in many places. We have to link this forest to as what the secretary mentioned, the central forest fine. But the problem is when the land or the area, some the states, and we need state support to link all those. And now with the campaign of 100 million trees, we try to improve some area that we can plant together with the government departments such as Forestry Department and Wildlife Department, and the states government. So Central Forest Spine Master Plan has been drawn and to connect these complexes of forests and then to make sure the area protected, the wildlife protected, the habitat protected, the source of water are protected, and then we can use for tourism also. So this thing was discussed since 2010, and now more than 10 years. I hope we need to reach some level of the discussion and implementation. So yes, are very important. So through Sahabat Rimba, we focus in Sungai Yu, this is passing on the near Lembu Raya, the road from Kuala Lumpur to Gua Musang, and then underneath we plant, or degraded area we plant with forestry so that we can improve the habitat for wildlife. So the community that involved in these projects, local community, and then there are 5 villages that participating in this program. We have a regular program visiting them. Of course, we need a sponsor to support their activities, and among the important activities are replanting trees in degraded forests and degraded area to improve the wildlife habitat. And then in order to plant the forest tree, we need to prepare the nursery, and then we have to have some program advice from the experts and so on. So it is an ongoing project, and then we started in 2016 to support the government initiative on tiger conservation program and restoration of the habitats. Another project that I'm going to highlight here is about the hornbills, because hornbills in Belum Temenggong is a very important habitat. Here is the map to show the where is the Belum Temenggong. It's near the Thailand border and northern Perak. This is one of the IPA, important bird area, and we need to conserve this important species, and 10 species of hornbill can be found here. This triangle is very important. In Ulu Muda is a location where mentioned by Dr. Hum just now, and then Halabala in Thailand, and then Ulu Muda. This triangle is very important. You can see 10 species of hornbills. We need to protect the habitat, understand about the bird behavior, and so on. So this Belum Temenggong is a very important area. It's 100 million years old tropical rainforest, and then of course a lot of saying that very valuable thing is there. So we might have some conflict later between collecting something valuable there compared to wildlife, water, and other ecosystem benefit. In that program, we have 2 activities related to hornbills. Number 1 is the Friends of Hornbills, Sahabat Enggam. This was established in 2018, and it is an ongoing project. So this is involve indigenous people, and then we have a team, we have a structure there. We give them education, and then we have an annual program so that they can do some activities and continuous education program. These are some of the program. For example, annual Hornbill Festival. We have monthly meeting and then exhibition and other things that can promote their knowledge and awareness for the hornbill protection and conservation. And this is another thing more interesting. Orang Asli as a hornbill guardian team, this project is I think more on very technical in the forest. They are employed to be a hornbill guardian, working their full time for safeguard of hornbill in the forest. So they are responsible in monitoring the status of hornbills in Belum Tenggo. This work is very challenging, and you imagine they are indigenous people living in the area, and we need to have a very systematic skills to educate them. They know about the forest, but how we want to put them into the very systematic way and scientific way in monitoring and understanding about hornbills so that they can manage them. We have to teach them about the nesting behavior, about the fruit trees, what fruits the hornbills eat. They know, but we need to put some scientific information there, and then the flowering patterns, and this is all about the behavior of animals and plants in the forest that can protect or make sure the population of hornbill are sustained. And then this is benefit not just for the forest, maintenance of the forest, but for their livelihood also. This is very important, and we need support, and then of course the government support this, and then the private sector or corporate sector also supporting this, and then we need more to help this huge area with unique 10 species on hornbill to be protected and maintained sustainably. So orang asli is a very important person because they stay there, they work there, and they know about the place better than us. But we need to give them a systematic knowledge. So what we do, there's a group of people there managed by Yap. Then we have to discuss systematically with the people, and then we have to see the picture there using the technology and identify the fruit trees, and then for the nest, and then another important skill is to locate the hornbills, identify the species, and look at their behavior and so on. So this is something important. And beside that, in the process of, say, for example, restoring the habitat, we need to do this nursery, and we have to educate the local community and so on. And at the same time, of course, we need to do some publicity, sharing knowledge and so on, so that we can get support, sharing information. And I'm very sure some other countries are also doing it. And by sharing information, we can exchange ideas and improve what we are doing for the future. So I think that's all. Thank you very much for your attention. And hopefully we can improve better what we are doing today for the future generation. Thank you very much. Denisa?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Ahmad. All right. You know what? We have a number of questions actually. And so hopefully we don't want to disappoint anybody. We're running out of time. So speakers, we're going to have to throw you a question each, but you know, if you keep them briefly, that would be great, that your answers really brief, and then we can actually go through them. But for the remainder of the questions, we will have to answer them via email, and I hope all of you don't mind that, okay? I'm going to start off really quickly with Professor Makoto. We have a question here. As we know, in Malaysia, land is a state matter. So in your opinion, how can local residents exercise their rights to protect forests by ensuring federal government policies are crafted, taking into consideration their voices despite, you know, state government plans? Can you explain that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think it is true that the land is a state matter. It is, of course. But actually, some people around the national park obtained special permission to cultivate the land for 30 years. This is a result of the flexible local responses by the park authority. And even local people in some villages introduced ecotourism. So I think it is important for both of the state authority and local people to communicate and discuss continuously. I think this is the point. That's my answer. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So we just got to be really persistent. That's what you're going to say, you know, really cut through and do what we need to do. Okay, I'm going to move on to Dr. Uromi, are you okay there? We could have one question here. Well, I've got so many questions, but just bear with me a little bit here. We've got one here. In terms of publication, how can publications on forest protection lead or translate to actual work on the ground? Furthermore, how can we take stock on what has been done and what is yet to be covered? How best to present this to the government or funder on project basis? I don't know how you're going to answer it briefly with 3 points there, but just give it a shot.
Yes, that's a very complex question, but I would like to briefly say that most funding cycles require, especially for academics, research scientists, most government funding instruments require publications as one of their outputs. So when we have publications that go out there, as Professor Ismail just said, it becomes also a platform for the discussion, for knowledge sharing, and publications can also highlight what needs to be done in the future, what's working, what is not working. So it provides sort of like a map for actual groundwork to move forward for. But how to take stock on what has been done? A very good example is right here what we have. This symposium, which brings together many experts that can, on real time, share information of what has been done, where we need to go, and discuss things is very important. Even the presentations that are done in this symposium, Professor Nath Kumar, Professor Tapan Nath Kumar, and myself, and many others, Professor Inoue, we worked very hard over almost 2 years to bring these to publication documents that have been, many of them have been already published online in the Journal of Sustainable Forestry. What is yet to be covered is a matter of doing reviews. I would like to keep my answer short so that all speakers can have a chance to answer a question. But if there's anybody else who wants to engage further, I'll be very happy and available during this symposium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Uromi. Yes, I think we can answer that further via email, you know, in further details. I'm going to move on to Dr. Hum, if that's okay. We've got one question here for you. As a member of the public, what can I do if the government does not share information related to state of protected areas, such as annual reports? What can I do in my capacity? Dr. Hum, tough question there.
Yeah, I think, thank you very much for the question. I think just, you know, in the normal situations, go there and shake hands. But now because of the COVID-19, we have to follow the SOP. I think writing them directly, or emailing them, or maybe for easier way, because MNS has a very strong partnership with the government. They have so many information. So and MNS is a membership-based organization as BirdLife partner in Malaysia. So if you join MNS as a member, you'll receive much more information than what you need. So I think that may be the easiest way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so very much, Dr. Hum. Ahmad Ismail, we've got one last question here, and it's for you. Yes. What is the challenges that MNS face in empowerment of indigenous people and local community for biodiversity conservation? You talked so much about biodiversity just now as well. Can you expand on that?
Oh yeah, that's very interesting. There are two things important. Number one is money. Number two is human resource. So we are now in Malaysia, especially I'm also working in the university. We are campaigning for young graduates, young students to focus or to major in biodiversity. Field work on biodiversity is very, very difficult. So meaning that how to encourage them to go to the field with the technology, we need money. So I think in the policy, government policy is there, and the General Secretary already mentioned about the funds, about whatever facilities they can provide. But I think we need policy or clear direction from the top so that the money can be delivered or the fund can be used rightly and focused. Say, for example, I brought up the issue of Belum Temenggo and then Central Forest Spine and then the Ulu Muda. So this area, if we think that is a priority for the government to protect, conserve and benefit the tourism, for example, or water, we need to put some money. If Dr. Holmes said Ulu Muda support 40% of rice for Malaysia, and the good word he said is a cheap rice, I think the government have to focus and the whole Malaysian population should demand for the cheap, high quality rice. So there, the government have to put more money, develop more human resource expert to work on it. We cannot really leave it like that and just talking, making policy. This is, I always said, 99.9% meeting for the policy and enforcement, and 0.1% is compiling the papers and no action. So this is, we need to change the culture. 30% are discussing, 70% are on the ground, improve with practical and highly motivated work so that we achieve our mission. I can talk this 3 hours to make sure we deliver the right thing, but we don't have time. We don't have time. And then the challenge for indigenous, yes, I mentioned earlier, they know about the forest better than us, right? I go to the forest, lost, right? They are there looking at me and lost the trail. But they need knowledge. They need a systematic knowledge. Who's going to deliver this systematic knowledge and the technology? And this need cost, time, training, passion, and so on. So all in complete system. I think Dr. Home will stay here longer and bring more money from international money. We can work together, focus in educating grassroots to support the government mission. As I mentioned, if 99.9% meeting, 1% compiling. So the rest of percentage, if there is any, we need to use stakeholders, grassroots, and NGOs like MNS to accomplish government mission. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ahmad Ismail. Well, I totally agree with all of you speakers. You know, I think the fund needs to be effectively used moving forward instead of just dripping everywhere. But anyway, once again, every viewers out there, please give a digital applause to our guest of honor and all our speakers. You guys have been so amazing. I look forward to seeing everyone at the first session later at 5 p.m. Do not miss it. For those we were not able to touch on your questions, please don't worry. We're going to answer them via email. We're going to keep in touch with you, and we're going to make sure that all of us are in this collectively, okay? So I'll see you at 5 p.m. because we're going to touch on policy support for multi-stakeholders engagement in forest protected areas management. So meanwhile, go get yourself a fresh cup of coffee and some snacks, and I will see you soon. Goodbye, everybody. See you later.
Bye. Hiromi. Bye.